Welcome to Focus on Seniors, a television show sponsored by Helping Seniors of Brevard County, Florida. The show is designed to make you aware of senior issues, needs, and resources available to help us age in place and with dignity. This show will help you as you develop your own aging and care plan.
I'm Joe Steckler, and welcome to Focus on Seniors, the television arm of Helping Seniors of Brevard County, a show designed to provide you with information on how to develop your own aging and care plans. Our topic today is weight control, obesity, and mobility. And with me in the studio are Dr. Lee Sheldon of Solid Bite Dental Implants. Dr. Sheldon, welcome.
Thank you, Joe.
And Nancy Deardorff, who is a registered nurse, and she is the administrator for the local Gentiva Healthcare.
Thank you, Joe.
Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you.
And the reason, excuse me, Helen, I'm not going to say what the saying is about when your nose itches, but I think that the topic of weight control, obesity, and mobility is going to become an even more important topic as our country ages and we develop. I know, Dr. Sheldon, that you have a strong opinion about nutrition and the foods that people eat. And I know, Nancy, that as a nurse and as the administrator for a skilled nursing organization that takes care of people in their homes, that you have a great appreciation of what people can and cannot do that do not eat the right foods, that gain too much weight, that are obese. And I was sitting in front of a Walmart store recently waiting for my wife to come out, and I just looked at the people, the men and the women, walking in and out of Walmart that needed to lose weight. Do I have a fixation on obesity and being overweight? Well, maybe in a way I do. And it's just like people say there's nothing like a reformed smoker. When I was 12 years old, my family owned a restaurant, and I weighed 212 pounds. I wore a size 44 suit. And then when I turned 13, I learned that, boy, those juniors and senior girls in high school were good looking. I really liked to dance with them. But I didn't want to dance with a little fat boy. I lost weight. And it changed my life. But through the years, in the 60 years, 64 years, 66 years, that I've lost that weight, I've done everything I could to keep it off. A couple of times I gained weight. I never got unsightly, but I felt different myself because I wasn't comfortable with how I felt when I knew I was eating incorrectly or if I wasn't exercising. That's my take on weight control, nutrition, mobility, obesity. Dr. Sheldon, I want to start with you first because I know that this is a subject near and dear to your heart.
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, it is, and Nancy I want you to participate in this because I feel strongly that, in fact, we've been led and we're allowing ourselves to be led in the wrong direction. That we're depending too much on what the media or what commercials tell us to make our food choices. What we're depending upon somebody else to prepare our foods rather than us. That when we go to the food store, we're shopping in the middle of the food store rather than the outside of the food store where all the fresh stuff is. And even the foods that we're eating, even if we think we're eating correctly, the foods themselves have been modified, and as a result, we're looking the way we do, which isn't, for many people, isn't the way we want to be. And so we talk about the mobility problem. Nancy's an expert on that, and I'm not. But how did we get to a lack of mobility? And the way we got to a lack of mobility is simply this. We stopped learning how to cook. We stopped looking at fresh foods. We allowed ourselves to take those things in that we're told to take in, and in some cases we've even lost the basic education that our parents taught us as to what good food is. And we've been lulled into this feeling of serenity that we can eat these foods and everything's going to be okay. Well, guess what? It's not. I see so many people, so many patients who are dependent upon medications in order to be able to control all of these things that could have been controlled if they would just modify their diets. And we're not saying just eat less. That isn't it. It's eat the right things. And if we just did that, and if you just bought a simple book and just looked at what the basics are, if you don't remember them, you can go back into what is correct. Joe and I have had arguments before. Well, I remember on one show that you and I did, in fact, it was more than one show, you said everything in moderation, right?
Yeah.
And the answer is no. Everything not in moderation, because the definition of moderation in 1960 and the definition of moderation in 2012, which is when we're taping this show, are totally different.
Now, I went to an Oktoberfest recently, and the food was fantastic. But there was one person that brought a dessert. It was like a toffee with a chocolate topping with nuts on it, and you made it on a flat pan, and you smashed that stuff. Listen, I'll tell you, the lady that made it brought 2 big pans of that stuff, and it still wasn't enough. People loved it. I had 3 pieces of it. It was really good. I don't need
True confessions. What are we doing here?
But. You know, you know, but at the same time.
But you feel guilty about it. You knew it.
I eat a lot of we eat fresh vegetables all the time.
Right.
When we make stir fry, we use fresh vegetables. My wife does that, and that's what we eat. But you mentioned the keyword mobility, and one of the things that Gentiva has is your Safe Strides program, and your Strong Believers in Balance, but all the mobility is certainly. All those programs are certainly much easier to do if a person weighs less.
Certainly, and I want to make a very important point. You know, I think most people, with maybe exception, most people want to be thin, and most people look at the topic of being overweight or obese as a physical and visual unpleasant thing.
Yes.
Okay, nobody wants to be overweight. Everybody wants to be skinny and look like a model. Okay. We have to go beyond the physicality of it. We have to go beyond, and I hear what you're saying about when you were 12 and you felt better about yourself. There is a huge psychological and physical aspect to it. But what we have to remember is being overweight or obese has so much more to do with general physical health.
Right.
Way more than it has to do with what you look like or how your clothes fit. Being overweight and or obese can lead to diabetes. It can lead to coronary artery disease. It can lead to stress. As we increase our belly fat, we increase the production of a hormone called cortisol. That is a stress hormone. That contributes to coronary artery disease and heart disease. There's so many diseases and conditions either created by obesity or exacerbated by them.
Sleep apnea.
Sleep apnea, absolutely.
What was that?
Sleep apnea.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, snoring. It seems kind of funny and benign to some people, but can be quite serious. Oftentimes, people with sleep apnea are told by their doctor lose weight and see if the sleep apnea goes away or at least improves. People with joint pain that are obese, that exacerbates that joint pain. So it's kind of, you could kind of get into a vicious circle. If you're overweight or obese, you would have a tendency, if you're in pain, to want to move a little bit less, and yet that's the very thing that would help. And the other thing I have to say is, I guess I'm finally at that age when I say, well, when I was a kid and I'm there, I spent a lot of time outdoors. I spent a lot of times, we didn't have video games back then. We just didn't. I grew up even before Atari came out. That's how old I am. And
you're really
everybody's kids or grandkids that I work with are talking about playing video games and watching TV. And it's a dangerous world we live in. I know you can't necessarily let your kid play alone in their front yard anymore, but kids need to get out there and move more, and that's a huge problem for this country.
I have a grandson, and I worry more about him in that respect than almost anything else. He was supposed to visit us recently. He couldn't get a flight down. His dad's a pilot. But I worry about the boy. Listen, my wife is going to buy an iPhone. That kid knew more about what she should get on the phone she bought than the sales lady was able to tell my wife about. He was smart on that. He plays these video games great. But he also happens to play soccer. But still, children today don't get out and play as much as we did. We didn't have a television set. I grew up in a town where the biggest thing on a Friday night was the hot tamale guy coming around with his push cart, and I never had a hot tamale because I was Catholic and I couldn't eat meat on Friday. So I never had a hot tamale like all the other kids did. But those are things that I remember. But I also remember that, but I didn't know it at the time, what you talked about, the loss of the weight was so important. And as I've gotten older, when my last Navy job, I come in the Navy retirement home in Gulfport, Mississippi, and I had a hospital under my command. I had doctors, I had 33 nurses, I had an assisted care floor, I had 550 well rooms, but I saw amputations, I saw people that had diabetic sores, that had not taken care of themselves, had not taken care of their feet. They didn't know the value of good nutrition. They didn't know the value of taking care of sores early on. And that's why when you talk about a show, weight control, obesity, you hit it right on the nose, Nancy. It's, looking good is really important because we have a lot of good people that could look really good in their clothes if they took care of themselves. But more than that, it's what are they doing to adversely affect their health?
Mm-hmm. And many of those diseases we talked about can be reversed. Diabetes can be reversed.
Yes.
Yeah, there's people that run high blood sugar or diabetic that are diet controlled. There's people that are on oral hypoglycemics. And then there's people on insulin. And in many cases, people on insulin can come off of that and go to an oral hypoglycemic. And in many cases, those people can come off and go to just diet control. And
I've seen that. But when I went to a wellness institute in California, I saw diabetics at their worst. And within 3 weeks, they were off of all of their medications. This can be done. I wouldn't do it without doctor's supervision, but make sure you're going to the right doctor for that supervision because you need to have that kind of control and that kind of monitoring, but it can be done. You had an interesting story, and that had to do with a woman who had celiac disease, and there's a whole issue here of wheat and what wheat was like. There's a very popular book that came out in 2011 called Wheat Belly. It was written by a cardiologist, and I've read it. It's made a tremendous difference in my life. But I think it goes to this idea that what we think we should eat based on commercial advertising, maybe we shouldn't at all. Mm-hmm.
Well, I astounded you. It was on a radio show that we did at radio station WLMEL. On one of our radio shows, you were talking about wheat, and I showed you I talked about an article my wife had given me from a 2-year-old nutrition magazine that people get on a monthly basis, and there was a big piece in there about the myth of wheat products being so good for us. It kind of shot a hole in it. And it's getting to the point, though, how do you know, you're a doctor, you're a nurse, how do viewers, people watching this television show, how do they begin to get an idea on what are the right foods? How do they control these things? I know both of you, we did a show together. We did a radio show on sugars. We did that one time. And the dangers and how much The sugars are in everything we just don't appreciate.
And the relationship of that to triglycerides, and the relation to triglycerides to heart disease, and also brain disease. I mean, we've got all of those things. The data is there, and frankly, it's not that difficult. Just go and get a newsletter, a conventional medical newsletter. They're not made for me. They're not made for Nancy. They're made for you. And read that newsletter. 8 pages a month is going to give you an awful lot of information. I read the Whitaker Wellness Letter, which is a great newsletter. I read something called Alternatives, excellent newsletter. Get a magazine and just find out what's available. It's not that difficult, and frankly, within a few months, you can be really well educated.
One thing I think I would ask both of you to talk about a little bit, maybe start, Nancy, with the dangers of excess fat in foods for people that are homebound patients, people that have mobility problems and weight control problems.
Well, this is an opinion, so I have to say I don't know if I can totally back your question about the dangers of fat, because if you give me fat and you give me sugar, I'll pick fat every time. Yeah, our society.
I want you to tell me why you're coughing when she finishes. Don't interrupt.
Our society has gone way overboard with low sugar, this, that, and the other thing. Low fat, everything, or light or whatever. Anytime you buy a product that's lower in fat, mayonnaise, yogurt, anything, take a look at the sugar content of a regular fat content item,
right,
and the sugar level in a low-fat item. Whenever you remove fat from a product, you have to make up the taste and the flavor, and they do that by adding sugar. So people who have a sugar problem and who also maybe have coronary artery disease that are trying to control their fat and cholesterol have a tendency to go low-fat everything. I have a relative that does that, low-fat everything. I tried to explain to them, do you understand that the sugar that your body doesn't use gets converted anyway? And they're and this was something they were taught by a dietitian. And they're not going to listen to relative Nancy, because even though I'm a nurse, I'm not a dietitian and I'm their relative. They're hung up on this dietitian, the dietitian, and they have low-fat everything in their house, and they're eating way more sugar in a day than I put in my mouth. When I buy mayonnaise, I buy mayonnaise. When I buy yogurt, I buy yogurt. And your question earlier with how do you know what to stay away from and what to eat is, I think you have to pay attention to your body. I think wheat is more detrimental to certain people, well, I know it is, than others.
Especially if you're a celiac.
It's been connected. Well, you can't have it with celiac disease. It's been connected with asthma and bronchitis. It has. I think there's other people that probably feel great on wheat. And I don't think that's something that anybody can necessarily find out on their own. So I would recommend what Dr. Sheldon said, which is start reading a newsletter. Start somewhere. And eat. I think the more natural you can get back to food, this country has made such an enemy out of red meat. There's nothing wrong with red meat as long as you don't have it every day. Just getting back to foods in their natural state, I think, is one of the most important things people can do.
Recently, I went to an Oktoberfest, and we all were asked to take a dish. So Terry, my wife, said something, and I said, okay, I'll fix my German coleslaw. And the reason I wanted to tell you, because here's what I put in. I took the 2 heads of cabbage, cut them in half, and sliced it real thin, put it in a bowl. Great big, I got a mixing bowl. It's that big around and that tall. It's teakwood. Brought it back from Denmark, from a couple that had fled from the invasion from Germany in 1939. And these people brought that salad bowl from Germany into Denmark, and I ended up buying it years later. But anyway, the beautiful salad bowl. But I threw the cabbage in there, and I poured a little olive oil in. I poured in some of my garlic salt. It's called Papa Joe's salt. And I put 3 cloves of garlic. I mashed the garlic up and just kept tossing it. Let it age a little bit, tossed it some more. Added a little more vinegar to it. It was cider vinegar. Add a little more of that to it, and a dash more salt. Put it in bags. Took it to this function at our club, and we went home. There was no coleslaw left. Ate every bit of it. Was that good or bad?
Good.
Did I do anything wrong?
No.
Okay.
I think it sounds pretty healthy. I mean, there isn't a place in our diets for sugar. It doesn't sound like you put any sugar in there.
No.
Oftentimes people do in coleslaw, but
no, I don't like sweet coleslaw.
It sounded pretty healthy, actually. You had olive oil in there. The only caution would be anybody who's on a low salt diet, but if you're using salt correctly and not adding too much, to me it sounded like a pretty healthy meal. And cabbage, by the way, is very good for you.
I love cabbage.
Yeah, it's very good for you, as is vinegar.
Okay, you had a story too, didn't you?
Well, we were talking earlier about wheat and what do you eat, and the dangers of wheat. A lot of people have allergies, and I was telling Dr. Sheldon I had a friend that developed celiac disease later in life. By the time it was diagnosed,
what is celiac disease? A lot of people don't know.
Celiac is a disease where people have trouble digesting gluten.
Gluten.
Okay, gluten, and gluten is the glue, if you will, in products such as wheat and other grains. You can see it if you've ever made a bowl of oatmeal and let it sit there for a while and then you can't hardly get that oatmeal off the side of the pan kind of thing. That's gluten.
I don't eat
or cream
oatmeal.
of wheat. If anybody's ever made cream of wheat, you could, put up wallpaper with it once it dries. So she went off wheat as a result of, and actually she went on a gluten-free diet. To be precise, and she lost weight automatically without changing any of her routine, just from not eating gluten and not eating wheat. She feels great, lost weight, and even her skin looks better. So, for her, it was detrimental to eat gluten, but there's also sort of a wave in the United States of people going gluten-free. You see it advertised more and more because they're finding out more and more, not just for people with celiac disease or sensitivities to wheat, but for the general population in general. It's good to stay away from wheat. So you're hearing that more and more.
And the reason for that is simple. Wheat has changed. The genetic modification of wheat has changed the properties of wheat. We have shorter growing seasons and a more stable crop, and 5% of the wheat gluten in that wheat has never been identified before. So why are we going gluten-free? Simply because we're eating something the body was never accustomed to ingesting in the first place. I have my own wheat story. I've had chronic bronchitis for years. I was coughing, and about 3 years ago I had acute episodes, and I started going on medications, and in order to prevent those acute episodes from occurring, I was doing the inhaler thing and other things, and I went off wheat, and I'm off medications. I went to the pulmonologist yesterday. He said, "You're all done. You don't need to see me anymore." So that's how important just getting off that simple wheat product can be, or at least how important it was for me.
An underlying theme that of what we've talked about today is that many people probably have problems, but they just don't know what's causing that problem, yet they're reluctant to go to a doctor to say that I've got this kind of a problem, so you get an honest look at it. Most of us think that we don't want to go to a doctor because we don't want to incur a medical bill. I've been a firm believer for many, many years that I need to talk to my primary care physician regularly so that he knows that my body changes. I've had some recent problems, and every time I go to the neurologist or go to the intervention pain management guy or any kind of an x-ray or a bone scan or anything is done, I make sure copies of all that are sent to my primary care doctor. And I have sat down with my primary care doctor and said, should I be reducing or eliminating some of these medicines because I see 3 or 4 different doctors? And we sit down, we take an honest look at what I'm doing. And I'm sure that you see this in home health care.
We see it a lot. It's called polypharmacy, anybody who's on 4 or more medications. And the average home health patient the average senior is on 12 prescription medications. That's a lot. That's a lot. But as far as talking to your doctor about medications, utmost important. As far as what do you eat, what do you put in your mouth, where do you go for guidance, I would agree with you. Most people don't want to incur a physician's bill. People don't want to incur a bill unless they have to. I don't go to the doctor unless I'm sick. Very, very few of us go for wellness checkups. But I think as far as diet and nutrition, one of the best people that you can consult is a nutritionist, not a dietitian, a nutritionist.
Where do you go for a nutritionist?
You can look in the phone book. You can Google it. There's nutritionists all over Brevard County. But it does mean paying a bill. It does mean incurring a cost. And it means going there, even though you might feel perfectly fine, to find out what is a good nutrition plan for you. Let's get away from the word diet. What's a good nutrition plan for you?
In all the years that we've been doing radio, television, and newspaper work together, you have both heard me address 3 words: elements of care. I continue to emphasize in all that we do that we need to focus on trying to solve our problems at the lowest element of care that we possibly can. And sometimes just asking the right person the right question gets you pointed in the right direction. We're going to have to close, but Nancy, I want you to give just a couple of what you feel about mobility part of it, and you talk about the nutrition part of it, because I know it's a big, but you're on the mobility. We're about 2.5 minutes. What would you say about the importance of mobility from the Safe Drives program?
Utmost important. I have a friend of mine that's really into stretching. He's really into fitness. And actually, he's really big into stretching, which a lot of people aren't. Most people, if they are into physical exercise, about the cardiovascular or the weight or the muscle definition, he's always stretching. And he said to me, you know what? I almost think stretching is more important than the other types of exercises. And it is, to keep those joints fluid, to keep your range of motion. But I guess my message for folks out there would be move. We don't move. We go through drive-thrus, then we come home and we sit and move like we used to.
My wife hears this. She's going to tell me to start moving after we eat. I don't want to do that. I like to sit in my chair. Lee, I'm not going to let her talk anymore.
I'll continue the theme then. Sit in your chair for about 15 minutes, then get up and move.
Okay.
You've got a beautiful neighborhood to walk in, Joe. There's no traffic on your street. It's a terrific place to be. And how do I know? Because I lived there.
I know you did.
So, Terry, you got my blessing.
Hey, look, it's the subject of mobility, weight control, and obesity is extremely important, and we can make light of things, and we need to make light of things in order to have a variance in our life. We need to have that, but we also need to to focus on some of the unpleasant things. And watching what we eat, sometimes it's unpleasant because we want to eat the good things. I want to thank you both for doing this show and look forward to doing more shows with you in the future. Thank you for watching today's episode of Focus on Seniors. If you have questions or comments, please call radio station WMEL 1300 at 321-631-1300 for more information. For information on senior care and resources, visit our website, helpingseniorsofbrevard.com. Thank you for watching today's show, and I hope we've provided you some good information on mobility, obesity, and weight control. Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.